I quietly left after discovering my wife's affair after 3 years and 7 months of marriage. A year later, my ghosted ex-wife tracked me down after hearing whispers of my new life. I'd moved to the hills, seeking solace in the silence of nature. I'm not sure why I'm writing this now, but perhaps putting it all down will finally close this chapter, and maybe my story will help someone else currently drowning in the same kind of betrayal I once faced. The end began on a Tuesday in February of 2018. The air was sharp and cold, a fitting backdrop for the ice that was about to form permanently around my heart. I worked as a contracts director for a tech firm, a role that came with a decent amount of travel but also offered the flexibility to work remotely. My wife, Clara, was a rising star in the world of corporate marketing, a VP whose career trajectory seemed to have no ceiling. We lived in a sleek, high-rise apartment in the city, a place with stunning views we were both too preoccupied to ever truly appreciate. Our story started 5 years earlier, at a summer cookout hosted by a mutual friend. She was surrounded by people, a vibrant center of attention, yet her eyes locked with mine from across the patio. Clara was effortlessly elegant, with a sharp intellect that could dissect a business plan or a novel with equal precision. For a guy like me, who felt more at home in a worn-out flannel shirt than a suit, her attention felt like winning the lottery. Our connection was immediate and intense. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Our dates stretched into entire weekends, a whirlwind of passion and intellectual discovery. I remember the specific sound of her laugh, the way she'd tuck her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the feeling of her hand in mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. After 18 months, we were married in a sun-drenched vineyard ceremony, surrounded by friends and family, utterly convinced of our forever. We moved into our spacious apartment, saving diligently for the house with a picket fence we'd always talked about. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the cracks began to show. It was around the 2-year mark that I felt the first shift. The late nights at her office became the new normal. "I'm paying my dues, Leo," she'd say, her voice often tinged with a weariness that felt like a wall between us. "It's the price of admission at this level." When I voiced concern about the increasing frequency of her work outings, her defensiveness was swift and sharp. "You travel for days at a time. Don't you dare try to police my schedule when I'm the one actually building something here." The irony was a bitter pill. My trips were short, just 3 or 4 days every 5 or 6 weeks. I offered, repeatedly, to cut back, to be home more, to be present. But our conversations became circular arguments, going nowhere fast, leaving me frustrated and her dismissive. Looking back with the painful clarity of hindsight, the signs were a blazing neon billboard I was too trusting, too deeply in love, to truly read. Our intimacy, once a constant, joyful part of our lives, dwindled to a rare and often strained event. She always had a reason: stress, exhaustion, a looming deadline. I, like a fool desperate to believe, accepted every excuse. The constant rejection was a slow, corrosive drip on my self-worth. She commandeered our second bedroom as her home office, a sanctum she would retreat into for hours, the door firmly closed. The classic signs of infidelity, the secret of texting, the phone always face down, I never saw. She was too careful, too disciplined for that. She carried a company-issued smartphone, a sleek black device that was never more than an arm's length away. The first tangible, undeniable clue presented itself about a month before my world finally shattered. Clara had stopped for groceries on her way home and asked me to help unload the bags. As I reached into the deep footwell of the back seat of her sporty sedan, my fingers brushed against something lacy and delicate. I pulled it out. It was a bra, black and expensive, from that exclusive boutique she loved. A cold, immediate dread washed over me, so visceral it made my stomach clench. I had a sudden, unwelcome memory of her habit of wriggling out of her bra from under her shirt when she was feeling particularly passionate and impatient. What was it doing here, discarded carelessly under the passenger seat? My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, painful rhythm that made me feel lightheaded. When I carried the final bags into the kitchen, my face must have been a mask of pale shock. Clara looked at me, her head tilted. "Are you okay? You look like you've just seen a ghost." I managed to shake my head, muttering something nonsensical about a stressful work call, using every ounce of my strength to contain the maelstrom of suspicion and fear raging inside me. That night and throughout the next day, I became a reluctant detective in my own life, re-examining every odd moment, every missed call, every flimsy excuse I had willingly accepted. A part of me still wanted to fight for us. I decided to be the husband she might be missing. That Friday, I went all out. I prepared her favorite meal, a complicated seafood pasta, set the dining table with our best china and silverware, and bought an expensive bottle of Pinot Noir and a beautiful bouquet of stargazer lilies. The apartment smelled of garlic, rosemary, and hope. When she breezed in, her attention already captured by her phone, I gestured to the set table. She offered a faint, distracted smile. "Oh, Leo, this is so sweet. I'm really sorry, but I completely forgot, I have to meet the team at that new lounge downtown. It's a last-minute client drinks thing. I can have a quick bite before I go, though." I went utterly silent. The fragile hope I'd been clinging to curdled instantly into a sickening, absolute certainty. I felt something deep within me, some fundamental cord of trust, snap clean in two. While she was in the shower, washing the day away, I made a cold, calculated decision. I found my old work phone, a device that still had a tracking app active, and I slipped it silently into the pocket of the blazer she had tossed over the back of a chair. Then, I walked back into the kitchen and, with a calm that terrified me, I scraped the beautiful, uneaten dinner and the vibrant lilies directly into the trash bin. She emerged from the bedroom, dressed in a sleek, dark cocktail dress, her perfume a cloud of familiar scent that now felt alien. "Okay," she said, her voice artificially bright, "let's eat that quick bite." "Never mind," I said, my voice flat and empty. "Go. Be with your team." She gave me a strange, scrutinizing look. "Are you angry with me?" "I'm sad," I corrected, the words tasting like ash, "that you never seem to want to do anything with me anymore." She let out a dramatic, exasperated sigh. "God, Leo, stop acting like a child. It's just work. This is how the game is played." "Foolish me," I muttered, standing perfectly still as the final pieces of our marriage settled into a horrible, unchangeable picture. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, I pulled out my personal phone and opened the tracking app. A little blue dot, representing my old phone and therefore her, pulsed on the screen. It moved steadily downtown, finally coming to a rest at the exact location of the upscale lounge she'd mentioned. I felt a wave of self-loathing. I was a stalker, a pathetic creature feeding his own misery. But a desperate, driving need for the truth pushed me out the door and into my car. I found a parking spot across the street from the lounge, with a clear view of the entrance. The wait felt eternal, each minute stretching out, filled with the frantic beat of my own heart. Then, I saw them. It wasn't a group of co-workers. It was just Clara and one man, older, silver-haired, wearing a tailored coat I knew cost more than my monthly rent. I recognized him from her company's website, a senior partner named Robert. He placed a proprietary hand on the small of her back, leaned in, and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was deep, intimate, and lingered for a moment too long. My entire body went numb, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar in my ears. I watched, paralyzed, as they walked, hand in hand, to his obscenely expensive sedan, got in, and drove away. My body moved on autopilot. I followed, a silent, grieving shadow trailing them through the brightly lit city streets. You guessed it. They pulled into the valet of a boutique hotel just 10 minutes away. I watched them walk through the rotating doors, his arm now slung around her waist. I had seen all I needed to see. I pulled over to the curb, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel. I slammed my fist against the leather once, twice, a raw, guttural sound tearing from my throat. Then, something inside me simply broke. The rage vanished, replaced by a profound, hollowing silence. It was over. I just started driving, aimlessly, the scene at the hotel playing on a relentless loop in my mind. I found myself on the winding roads leading out of the city, and eventually, I pulled into the gravel parking lot of a rustic-looking tavern nestled near the foothills. About 30 miles from our apartment. The sign, the Lone Pine, creaked in the wind. I walked in and slumped onto a bar stool, the scent of old wood and fried food filling my nostrils. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked me over as she wiped a glass. "Rough night, sweetheart?" she asked. You look like someone just kicked your puppy and stole your truck. I managed a weak, half-hearted smile. You could say that. A moment later, a man sat down on the stool beside me. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with the weathered, sun-beaten skin of someone who spent his life outdoors. He wore a simple flannel shirt and well-worn jeans. "Rough night," he echoed, his voice a low, calm rumble. I didn't feel like talking, but there was a grounded, steady energy about him that seemed to repel drama. To my own surprise, the story spilled out of me in a disjointed, emotional rush: the bra, the ruined dinner, the kiss, the hotel. "All I want to do," I finished, my voice thick with a pain I could no longer contain, "is get away from her. I want to forget any of this ever happened." "You're not alone, buddy," he said, giving my shoulder a firm, solid pat. It wasn't a gesture of pity, but of shared understanding. "Name's Jack. I've been right where you're sitting, figuratively speaking. Felt like the world ended. But I think there's a reason these things happen. Your life can now take a positive or negative turn. I assure you, at this point, everything is totally up to you." His words, simple and unadorned, cut through the fog of my despair like a beacon. He wasn't a philosopher, he was a man who had seen his share of life's storms and come out the other side. "Are you going to move out?" he asked, his gaze steady. The question jolted me. I realized my planning hadn't extended beyond the initial, primal need to flee. I don't know. I just knew I couldn't be near her tonight. "I've got an idea," Jack said, swirling the ice in his glass. "I've got an old Airstream trailer on my property. It's just sitting there, gathering dust. Needs a little TLC, but it's solid. Good bones. Why don't you come take a look? I'll give you a hell of a deal. You could park it on a nice, secluded spot I have up on the ridge. It'd be good for you to get out of your situation, clear your head. Just a thought." "Honey," the bartender chimed in, leaning on the bar, "if I'd had a chance to escape my own mess years ago by hiding out in a trailer, I'd have taken it in a heartbeat. Sometimes you just need to get your head on straight, and you can't do that with all the noise." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the entire city I'd left behind. It felt like I'd stumbled into some strange, serendipitous dream. These strangers were offering me a lifeline. "Yes," I heard myself say before I could overthink it. "I'll think about it. I'd like to see it." We exchanged numbers, and I drove home that night with a sliver of something I hadn't felt in months: perspective. A path forward, however uncertain. And I knew one thing with absolute, bone-deep certainty: I would never, ever share a bed with Clara again. She was waiting on the couch, her posture rigid. "Where have you been?" she demanded, standing up as I entered. The apartment felt like a stranger's house. "Where have you been?" I countered, my voice eerily calm. "You know I was getting drinks with the team from the Anderson account," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Are you having an affair?" I asked, the words hanging in the air between us, stark and undeniable. I saw the shock flash in her eyes, but it was quickly mastered, replaced by a mask of indignant fury. "No. How dare you? That's a ridiculous accusation. Why would you even ask me that?" "Someone I know saw you," I said, my tone flat, refusing to engage in her drama. "Who? Who told you that?" she fired back, her voice rising. She accused me of being drunk, of being paranoid, of trying to sabotage her career. I didn't respond. I just walked away, gathered a pillow and blanket from the linen closet, and slept on the couch, the image of her and Robert burned onto the back of my eyelids like a brand. The next morning, we moved through the apartment in a silent, charged truce. I waited until I was alone, then I called Jack. A few days later, I drove out to see his property. It was more beautiful than I'd imagined, 50 acres of rolling hills dotted with ancient oak trees, quiet except for the whisper of the wind through the grass and the calls of distant birds. The Airstream was parked near a small workshop, a little dusty, but its iconic silver bullet shape promised adventure and solitude. Inside, it was compact but complete: a small kitchenette, a dinette, a bathroom, and a bed at the far end. It smelled of old canvas and possibility. I handed Jack a stack of cash on the spot. It felt less like a purchase and more like an investment in my own survival. Over the next few weeks, I made half-hearted attempts to get Clara to confess, but all I received in return were more layers of gaslighting and defensive anger. It was like trying to nail smoke to a wall. So, I stopped trying. Instead, while she was at work, I began quietly, methodically moving my most important possessions, my clothes, my books, my laptop, my grandfather's pocket watch, my entire collection of hiking and camping gear, out to a storage unit I'd rented under a false name. I was building my escape route, and with every box I carried, every trip I made to the unit, I felt a little piece of my agency, my very self, coming back to life. I started spending more time with Jack and his circle of friends, a contractor, a park ranger, a potter who lived off-grid. They were simple, honest people who talked about the weather, their projects, and the best fishing spots. They didn't care about corporate titles or stock options. I also made a conscious decision to limit my drinking. I would not allow her betrayal to turn me into a cliché of a broken man drowning his sorrows at the bottom of a bottle. The perfect, clean exit presented itself when Clara announced a mandatory work conference in Phoenix. The day her flight took off, I moved the last of my things out of the apartment. I did not leave a long, emotional letter. I had drafted pages of anguished questions and accusations, but in the end, I scrunched it up and threw it away. On the clean, cold surface of the kitchen table, I placed my wedding ring. On a single, pristine piece of paper, I wrote just 3 words, was it worth it? Then I walked out, closed the door for the last time, got into my car, and drove to the hills. The moment I stepped inside the Airstream, the silence was not empty, but full. It was a deep, resonating peace. I was free. Her text started as confused, "We just landed. Where are you? Did you have to travel for work?" Then turned frantic over the next day, "Why aren't you answering your phone?" When she returned home to the half-emptied closet and my missing belongings, her messages became a torrent of panic and rage. After a week of my absolute radio silence, the confession I had once so desperately craved finally arrived. "I'm sorry. Things got out of hand. It was a mistake. I never meant for it to go so far. I was going to end it." A mistake. The word was an insult. A mistake is using salt instead of sugar in your coffee. What she did was 1,000 conscious choices, a sustained, daily campaign of deception. Her messages eventually turned nasty, "You're a coward. You won't even face me," and then pitiful, "Please, Leo, we can fix this. I love you. Let's talk." I let them all wash over me, reading them with a detachment that surprised me. After a few months, I went to a store in a different town and changed my number, severing the last tether. The divorce papers arrived via email from her lawyer. I read them once, then simply replied, "Okay. I agree." My utter indifference to the process seemed to infuriate her more than any fight would have, but for me, it was the final, clean, surgical cut. And then, life began again. I established a new routine. I woke with the sun, made coffee on the small stove, and spent my mornings running the trails that crisscrossed Jack's property and the surrounding state land. The mountain air was a balm, cleaning out the lingering poison in my lungs and my soul. I started working remotely from the dinette table, the view of the rolling hills through the window a constant source of calm. It was on one of those runs that I met Elena. Her Jeep was pulled over to the side of the gravel road, a flat tire sagging miserably. She was wrestling with the lug nuts, muttering under her breath. I stopped to help. She was a wildlife photographer, with sun-streaked brown hair and eyes the color of the forest. There was a quiet strength to her, a groundedness that was immediately appealing. We got the tire changed, and she thanked me with a genuine smile. A few days later, I ran into her at the local general store, and we ended up sharing a coffee. She called me her mountain man, and for the first time in years, the title felt right. I felt like I was exactly who I was supposed to be, in the exact place I was meant to be. The peace felt permanent. But it was shattered one sunny Saturday morning almost a year to the day after I'd left. I was at the local farmer's market, buying vegetables from a grizzled old man named Hank, when I heard a voice, hesitant and familiar, call my name from behind me. "Leo." I turned, a bunch of fresh carrots in my hand, and there she was. Clara. She looked different, thinner, her face sharper, etched with lines of a stress I'd never seen before. She was dressed in expensive yoga attire, but it looked costume-like in this setting. She hurried over, her hand outstretched as if to touch my arm. I took a deliberate step back, creating a space between us that felt as wide as a canyon. I've been looking for you, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Can we talk? Please. Just for a few minutes. Against my every instinct, I agreed. I led her away from the bustling market to a quiet bench overlooking a small, duck-filled pond at the edge of the town square. She started with the compliments, her eyes scanning me. You look different. Really good. The beard suits you. You've gotten so fit. She was turning on the charm, trying to reactivate some old dynamic, but my internal radar was screaming, its needle buried in the red. Then, the performance crumbled. She broke down, her shoulders shaking with sobs she didn't seem to be faking. She told me that after I left, karma, as she put it, had hit her with the force of a freight train. The affair with Robert had become an open secret at her firm. He, who was engaged to the daughter of a board member, had orchestrated a brilliant campaign of character assassination, painting Clara as the unstable, predatory seductress to save his own skin. She, in a fit of vengeful fury, had called his fiancée and told her everything in graphic detail. The resulting scandal had been nuclear. Robert was promoted to a meaningless position at a remote branch office. And Clara was essentially forced to resign under a cloud of humiliation. I ended it with him the day after you left, she sobbed, her face in her hands. I was so alone. I felt so stupid. I need to know, is there any chance for us? I know the divorce is final, I know, but we could start fresh. Somewhere new. I just looked at her, this stranger who had caused me so much profound pain. You have no right, I said, my voice low but firm, to come here and try to undo all the progress I've made. You killed our marriage the moment you chose him. I was there, Clara. I watched you walk into that hotel with him. I saw you kiss him in the parking lot. Did you know that? She flinched as if I'd physically struck her, her eyes wide with a fresh wave of shock and shame. The conversation continued, a messy, painful torrent of her apologies, excuses, and my cold, hard realizations. She begged me to have dinner with her, just one dinner. I reluctantly agreed, but on my terms, a public pizza place on the main street, no alcohol. I wouldn't give her the ammunition of lowered inhibitions. We sat at a small, checkered tablecloth table, and for a fleeting moment, over a slice of pepperoni, I saw the ghost of the witty, passionate woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But it was just a ghost, a memory flickering in the eyes of someone I no longer knew or trusted. As I walked her to her car, the streetlights casting long shadows, she turned to me, her eyes desperate in the dim light. Leo, one last thing. Would you have forgiven me? If the roles were reversed, if I had been the one cheating, would you have taken me back? She was silent for a long moment, truly considering it. Yes, she said finally, softly. I think so. In time. With a lot of counseling. With a lot of work. If you had proven you were truly remorseful. Maybe I could do that, I said, looking out into the dark shapes of the mountains. In 5 or 10 years, maybe. I'll wait, she whispered, her voice breaking as she grabbed my hands in hers. God, Leo, I will always love you, and I will do anything, to prove it to you. Her words, spoken with such fervent conviction, unsettled me deeply, but they did not change the fundamental truth in my heart. I gave her my email address, but firmly refused to give her my new phone number. You'll just blow it up with texts and calls, I explained, and she didn't argue, her tears acknowledging the truth of it. A week later, the promised long email arrived. It was a masterpiece of regret and self-flagellation, a detailed map of her misery. And then came the final, desperate plea. She had a job offer in Seattle, a chance to truly start over, and she wanted me to go with her. Her reconciliation had a deadline and a relocation package. My reply was final and unequivocal. I told her I had no intention of reconciling, that I was happy with the life I had built, that I wished her the best, but that our path together was permanently closed. I ended it with, you made your bed, Clara. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be with me. Her response was swift, angry, and telling, confirming that her pursuit had been more about her own salvation, her own convenience, than about me. It was about fixing the mess she'd made, and I was supposed to be the convenient tool for that fix. Luckily, I had a pre-scheduled week-long work trip to the East Coast. By the time I returned, her moving truck would be long gone. She is gone now. The emails have stopped. The silence in my hills has returned, complete and profound. I am here, in my silver airstream, with the windows open to the sound of the wind whispering through the pine trees. I have my life, my hard-won peace, and my self-respect. You don't have to spend your life anchored to someone who betrayed you. The weight of their choice is theirs to carry, not yours. If you're in a similar storm, just know that on the other side, there can be quiet sunrises, the simple joy of a morning run, and a peace you build for yourself, with your own two hands. It does get better. It gets so much better. Subscribe Karma Twin Voices for more.